and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. On Wednesday, a blast near the Afghanistan Foreign Ministry in the heart of Kabul sent shockwaves through the Chinese power corridors. Why is that? Because Chinese diplomats were supposed to be present inside that building for a meeting. Tonight on Gravitas, we decode what's really happening behind the scenes, what lies behind that attack. Why is the ISIS targeting the Chinese in Afghanistan after it claimed the attack in Kabul? A series of question marks remain unanswered. For the ISIS versus Taliban situation, it's a new battle for survival and a classic tale of terrorists versus terrorists. Where does this leave the China-Taliban ties? Is China's Afghanistan game plan falling apart? That is our top focus in tonight's edition. Also on the show for you tonight, we take a closer look at the documents row, which is now putting further pressure on the American president. Was the leader spying on his own allies? We tell you what's brewing. China's shrinking population is expanding its economic woes. Not like the economic concerns were getting any lesser, but now its population is at the center of this fresh crisis. We tell you what's happening. Do makeup products cause cancer? We tell you what the latest is on that front. Do you have a problem when it comes to distinguishing between left and right? If you do, you are not alone. We tell you why this happens and what the studies and the scientists say. Our cover story tonight comes from Afghanistan. On Wednesday, a suicide bomber blew himself up near Afghanistan's foreign ministry. This was in the heart of Kabul, killing 20 people, according to different estimates. Why did this attack happen? Who was this silent assassin? What was the reason for this attack on the Taliban government? The bomber bypassed the Taliban security barriers and blew up his explosive belt in the middle of employees and guards. But that is just one part of this story. Who was behind this suicide mission? Who was the target? On Gravitas tonight, we tell you why there is more to this attack than what meets the eye. Let's first tell you about this attack itself. These were the scenes that emerged from on the ground. Window panes in the Interior Ministry, the ministry there were shattered. 20 people lost their lives, more than 40 were injured. They were taken to a surgical center in Kabul. Do you know what was happening inside the building at that point when the blast struck? A Chinese delegation was supposed to be present. It was due to hold talks with the Afghan officials inside that ministry building. Let me say that again. The attack took place at a time when Chinese diplomats were supposed to be present inside. Who was behind the attack? ISIS-K, or the Islamic State, it has claimed responsibility for this bombing. The local IS branch, known as the Islamic State Khorasan, it gives the reason to this question that we've been asking. Now, its target was a Chinese delegation which was scheduled to hold talks with the Taliban government in the building. It was fortunate for the delegation that the meeting had not started. Ahmadullah Muttaqi, a senior official in the Afghan Prime Minister's office, said no foreigners were present at the ministry when the suicide bomber struck. The Chinese government condemned the attack but said no Chinese citizens had been killed or injured. And this is not an isolated incident. Chinese nationals have faced increasing security concerns. There was an ISIS-K attack last month on a Kabul hotel that's popular with Chinese businessmen. The attack killed at least 3 people and injured another 18, including 5 Chinese nationals. And there is more than one reason for the attack. The ISIS-K is taking revenge against Beijing for China's treatment of the Uyghur Muslims. And we have been telling you repeatedly on this show about China's persecution of this community, the Uyghur Muslims, in China's western Xinjiang region. The Afghan Taliban claimed to have improved security on the ground since they grabbed power in Kabul through a combination of terrorism and full-scale invasion. But the Taliban victory has not brought any peace to Afghanistan. There have been hundreds of bomb blasts and attacks launched mainly by the Islamic State group. The ISIS-K, or Islamic State Khorasan province, the local branch, it came into being in January 2015. The ISIS-K has many members who defected from the Afghan Taliban. They jumped ship and chose to join the ISIS-K because they thought the Afghan Taliban was not radical enough. I know what you're thinking. It was hoped that when the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, the fighting would end. Now that the troublemakers were in power, who would trouble them? But peace in Afghanistan remains an elusive dream. It should have been easy for the Taliban to nip the ISIS-K in the bud. With the latest weapons in its armory left behind by the Americans when they suddenly abandoned Afghanistan, the ISIS-K is turning out to be a menace for the Taliban. Its previous attacks have targeted Russian, Pakistani and Chinese diplomats and civilians in Kabul. Why has China become a particular target? Xinjiang is one reason. And the second one is that it is busy striking deals on mines and natural resources with the Taliban. And this one, like we told you yesterday, is a multi-million-dollar deal between Xinjiang Central Asia Petroleum and Gas Company and the Taliban in Kabul, a 25-year pact with the Chinese company to drill for oil in the country's Amu Darya basin. For the Taliban, it's a major economic victory. It's been more than a year since the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and they have been desperately craving political legitimacy and economic heft to improve their finances. China has been eyeing Afghanistan's mineral fields. Most of them remain unexplored. And this is the first major energy extraction agreement since the Taliban came to power in 2021. The deal is estimated to be $540 million. It gives Beijing access to the Amu Darya basin in northern Afghanistan. Afghanistan's mineral wealth is a major pull factor for Beijing. But there is more to this. And this, once again, is about China's unending greed for influence. You see, it wants to keep Afghanistan and Central Asia away from the reach of the West. And there are also security factors at play here. China wants the Taliban to act against Turkestan Islamic Party. This is one of the Uyghur-led militant groups in Afghanistan and targets China's actions in Xinjiang. And you already know what's happening in Xinjiang, China's persecution of the Uyghur Muslims there. China at this point is worried. Ideally, with Pakistan as a client state and anti-American Taliban in Kabul, it should have been a win-win situation for Beijing. There has been much talk of adding Afghanistan to China's Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But at this point, all expectations are being tattered by the fast-changing developments. The relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan has been strained as well over disputes along the border. Has Pakistan's Afghanistan strategy backfired? Particularly since the brother organization of the Afghan Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, has launched a civil war against Islamabad. And this could affect China's game plan as well. If the Chinese are not safe in the heart of the Afghan capital, where are they safe? The ISIS-K's bloody attack has hit the Chinese hard. The attacks against the Chinese targets in Kabul are a crucial test for China. After all, Afghanistan's mineral resources are at stake, which in turn are linked to China's influence in the region. And for the ISIS Khorasan, a new battle for survival has started on an old battlefield. With China rather than America involved in the conflict, this may just be the beginning of a pattern that's riddled with bloodstains. A classic tale of terrorists versus terrorists, destroying the land and its people. US President Joe Biden has fallen into a trap of his own making. His approval numbers were rising, US inflation had been under control, jobs were increasing, things were looking up for America. And yet, Biden had to do some digging of his own. He is known for his gaffes and blooper moments, but this one landed him in deep waters. Within a week, the president has been found in possession of classified documents. The first batch was discovered in November, but it did not see the light of the day for 2 months. And only days later, another batch has been found. The US Justice Department is now appointing a special counsel to investigate the matter. Biden faces weeks, if not months, of legal probing, interviews, searches of his properties, speculation and bad headlines over his mishandling of the classified documents. The second set was found at Biden's Delaware home, in his garage beside his car. I hope you realize that these are confidential documents that I'm talking about. And when asked about this, the Gaffe King tried to downplay the situation. Here's what he said.
Get the chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage, okay? So it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
On Tuesday, he had casually shaken off the first revelation, saying that he was surprised to know about their existence. That's pretty convenient, don't you think? This is not what he said when former President Donald Trump was in a similar situation, when his Mar-a-Lago home was raided by the FBI. In fact, let's see what he said back then. In an interview with CBS News, Biden was shown a photo of top secret documents laid out on the floor at Trump's estate. Biden had voiced disbelief, and this is what he had said. How something like that could happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. Let me emphasize that. How could anyone be that irresponsible? And now, classified documents are being recovered from Biden's garage, his old office. What is this hypocrisy all about? When Trump does it, he faces criminal investigation, and when Biden does it, he says it was a mistake, carelessness, mishandling. But we would like to argue that 10 documents were found in Biden's think tank office in November, and some of these papers were classified at the top secret. As top secret, at sensitive, compartmented information level. They reportedly contained intelligence briefing related to the UK. Now, the UK is one of America's biggest allies. What really was the American president's motive here? What job did top-level UK briefings have in Biden's old office? And that too after his term as the vice president was over. Those documents should have been returned to the National Archives long before that. And just have a look at the timing of this whole thing. The first set of documents were discovered on the 2nd of November, just 6 days before the midterm elections. Biden's lawyers had informed the National Archives. The U.S. Justice Department knew about it, and yet this was not made public until recently. Why was the matter kept a secret? Why was it not disclosed right away? Biden and his aides have been buoyant over midterm election results. They say the results were far better than they had feared. But let me ask you this. Would the results have been the same if Biden's mistake was aired in due time? Democrats have already been traumatized by what happened with Hillary Clinton in 2016. She struggled to justify the handling of her own records. Her presidential dreams were shattered by the entire incident. The Democrats had been enjoying a clean shot. They had been targeting Republicans time and again, bringing up the matter, pointing fingers at Donald Trump for taking classified documents back home. How exactly are they going to save their face now? Well, they have their arguments. Biden's aides have gone to great lengths to downplay his actions. They have pointed how Trump's handling was way worse than Biden's. Trump apparently knew about the documents. He deliberately took them home and declined to give them back. And Biden, on the other hand, is claiming to be innocent. He says he did not know he was in possession of them. But I have to ask, are documents that are classified as top secret, that contain intelligence briefings regarding the UK, a joke? Did Biden simply forget about them? And is that reason enough to let him off the hook? Can incompetence and mishandling be justified like that? The White House has not really explained how the documents ended up in Biden's office and home, but the Republicans are actively pursuing the matter. They have started making requests, drafting letters, pledging investigations. They are demanding to see the visitor logs for Biden's homes. They are calling the discovery of the papers a national security risk. U.S. democracy just cannot stay away from controversies. A special counsel will now be scrutinizing the American president. Trump is already being investigated. And this creates some equivalence between the cases. But it seems superficial because Trump has been accused of ill intent, whereas Biden is being preached as innocent. Let's also understand here that a wide variety of documents can be marked as classified. And the ultimate political fallout for Joe Biden depends on the nature of the papers found at his home. The documents at Trump's residence included highly sensitive material on China and Iran. So he had dug up his own grave. The first batch of Biden's documents were also classified top-level secret, but if it is any compensation, they were far less in number than those of Donald Trump. Both the politicians are now smeared with dirt. For Joe Biden, the legal significance of his actions seems murky. The political ramifications are even worse. He is carrying a burden of keeping things from public for months now, of hiding a wrongdoing just before the midterms. Will this affect his political standing now? The probe will make things clear. And bad days just don't seem to end for Beijing. There is the COVID-19 chaos. China's economic strength is apparently fading. And now the only strength that China thought it could hold on to is depleting as well. I am talking about China's population. The world's most populous country is on track of reverse population. What does that mean? In simple terms, China's population is shrinking. The country has not said so in as many words, but very soon it will be releasing uneasy data. We're not talking about Wuhan virus deaths, but the number of births in 2022. And this data is expected to bear bad news. One independent demographer has estimated that the number of births in China last year was around 10 million. which happens to be a record low. A plummeting birth rate means its population is shrinking, and Chinese officials could not be more worried. Just look at the sort of policies that Chinese officials are rolling out. Shenzhen City Health Commission has promised 19,000 yuan, or nearly $2,800, for couples who have a third child. The couples will also receive yearly incentives until the child turns 3 years old, and similar cash incentives have also been promised to couples who have a second child or their first. A similar announcement has also been made in Jinan, which is a city in the Shandong province. Couples have been told that they will receive a monthly childcare subsidy of 600 yuan, or $89 if they have a second or third child this year. And the city of Yichang in central Hubei has also announced a similar childcare subsidy. Now, the obvious question is, why? Why is China encouraging couples to have more babies? And why is a falling population scaring the Chinese officials? Now, normally one would think the more the people, the more stretched the resources, right? China is already home to 1.4 billion people. Its population is 37 times that of Canada's, 4 times the United States. 1/6 of the world's population lives in China. And despite that, a falling population can shake up the system. You see, China is big on harnessing human resources. Remember, it is the world's factory. But it wasn't always one, and China worked hard on harnessing the demographic dividend. Between 1978 to 2017, China's GDP went from $149.5 billion to $12 trillion. Of course, this would not have been possible had China not opened up. But it also would not have been possible without the Chinese workforce. China capitalized on cheap labor. It developed labor-intensive industries. For the people of China, this meant jobs and more opportunities. And for the People's Republic of China, it meant progress. When the population falls, progress also falls. For China, a shrinking population means growing number of elderly, thinning number of working-age population, more healthcare costs, and a falling GDP. In December 2022, the United Nations had said that the number of Chinese aged between 15 and 64 will fall by more than 60% this century. And the timing of the upcoming report could not be worse. Production disruption in China is already making global headlines. We all saw the visuals of Foxconn employees fighting against the Chinese authorities instead of assembling iPhones. As China asserts itself on the world stage, its claim to fame is fading away. For China, its population has always been a source of power. The more the population, the more the power. And now that power is fading away, and Xi Jinping and his men are staring at a demographic crisis. And guess what? China's loss will be India's gain. This year, India will be overtaking China as the world's most populous country. Also, India's population will be aging much slower than China. There could not be a more bitter pill for China. Now, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I use the word makeup? Eyeliners, lipsticks, products that are used every day. What about the word cancer? Does that come to your mind? Let me tell you why I asked this question. Have a look at this headline. Scientists find toxic forever chemicals in more than 100 popular makeup products. First, what are forever chemicals? These substances, PFAs, are a group of manufactured chemicals. They do not break down. They basically stick around in the human body, in the environment for a long time, and which is what gives them the name forever chemicals. And you know why that's a reason for concern? because they are found in everyday consumer products, including makeup products. Have a look at this study. It was published earlier in the journal Environmental Science and Technology Letters. And here is why the presence of these chemicals is a major cause for concern. PFAS are linked to cancer, hormone disruptions. Their health effects also include weakened immune systems and low birth weights. Basically, our skin, lips, eyes can end up absorbing these toxic chemicals through thin membranes, and we can also end up ingesting the lipstick that we are wearing. There are multiple products out there that promise to be long-wearing. PFAS, these chemicals make that happen. They are added to cosmetic products to increase their long-term wearability, to make the skin smooth. Basically, they enhance the durability. PFAS do not break down in water. Cosmetics that promise to stay on for long periods of time, marketed as wear-resistant, long-lasting, waterproof, they contain the maximum amount of these toxic substances. But are cosmetic companies aware of this? Do they know what harm these substances cause? And if yes, what are they doing about it? Will they act? All legislation aimed at regulating these forever chemicals have died in the US Congress. Cosmetic companies flex their lobbying muscle as bills did not gain enough Republican support. The proposals would have put bans on PFAS in food packaging, textiles, and cosmetics. They also entailed measures to set up stricter cleanup standards. The PFAS Action Act was most feared by the industry because it would have imposed tighter limits on the use of these forever chemicals. They would have made chemicals producers and users financially responsible for cleanup. But all of this went for a toss because of a lack of majority in the parliament. Moving on for now, an Australian politician, Dominic Perrottet, is facing heat for an incident from about 20 years ago. When he was 21, the current Premier of New South Wales dressed up as a Nazi. He has issued a public apology, but critics say that youth is no excuse for his actions. Our next report getting you the details.
Dominic Perrottet is a 40-year-old Australian politician. He's the Premier of New South Wales, Australia's most populous state. About 20 years ago, on his 21st birthday, he had dressed up as a Nazi. He released a video on Twitter where he apologizes for his actions.
I made a terrible mistake at my 21st birthday party where I wore a Nazi uniform as fancy dress. I'm deeply ashamed of the fact that I did that, and I'm truly sorry for the hurt, pain and distress that action will cause many people right across New South Wales, and particularly our Jewish community, Holocaust survivors and veterans and their families. I'm truly sorry for that mistake.
Between 1941 and 1945, Nazis systematically murdered about 6 million Jewish people. They were killed in pogroms, mass shootings, and gas chambers. The process started in 1933, when Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He ordered the creation of concentration camps for people the Nazis deemed undesirable. The Nazis believed in the superiority of the Aryan race and started isolating Jewish people who lived in Germany. They boycotted Jewish businesses, forbade marriages between Jewish people and Germans, and set up ghettos to segregate Jewish people after Germany invaded Poland in 1939. The segregation and dehumanization of the Jewish community culminated in what the Nazis called the final solution. It was a genocide. On January 27, 1945, the Soviet army liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp. Though most Jewish prisoners had been forced to leave the camp and commit a death march, about 7,000 prisoners had been left behind. Most of the prisoners were seriously ill due to their imprisonment. Soldiers described the prisoners as living skeletons. They were shocked at the inhumane treatment of the Jewish prisoners and the true scale of the atrocities committed by the Nazis. January 27th is now International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a memorial day to remember the millions who were killed by the Nazis. Dominic Perrottet is being condemned because he chose to dress up as the very people who committed the atrocities. He's being criticized for insulting the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. His excuse is he was young and naive back in 2003 when he wore the costume. Around that time, another public figure wore a Nazi costume as well, Prince Harry of the British royal family. The story is in the news again, because Harry has made new claims about the incident. In his memoir, Spare, that released earlier this week, Harry's photograph wearing the Nazi costume made headlines in Britain at the time. He was seen with a drink and a cigarette in his hands, and the Nazi insignia donned his arm. It was a scandal. He was condemned by the media and even admonished by the UK's chief rabbi. In his book, Harry now claims that the idea behind the costume actually came from Prince William and his wife Kate. He says the current Prince and Princess of Wales encouraged him to dress up as a Nazi. The royal family has not responded to the allegation yet.
Imagine this. You are browsing your favorite store. You find something that you have wanted for quite some time. A dress that you saw that your favorite celebrity was wearing. Perhaps a perfume that you liked on your friend. You have a look at the price tag. Baffled by the price, you put it back on that rack. Now think of celebrities. The ones you look up to. They have millions in their banks. They never, perhaps, have to look at the price tag while buying anything. Never have to think twice before taking a vacation. Unlike you, who's been putting off that one trip for quite some time now, you would think, how lucky are these stars? How financially safe they are. But are they really? Maybe not as much as you think. Usain Bolt, the 8-time Olympic champion, has fallen prey to an investment fraud now. Millions of dollars have reportedly gone missing from his account. With the investment firm Stocks and Securities Limited, Bolt has been with the firm for a decade now. His entire portfolio is under review now. The matter has been taken up by Jamaica's Financial Investigations Division and Financial Services Commission. Now, I'm not asking you to sympathize with Usain Bolt, but we do want you to know that investment or corporate frauds don't care if you are a celebrity. Take the example of Johnny Depp. The actor has faced a string of controversies in his career. His drawn-out trial with ex-wife Amber Heard was the latest one. But before that, he was involved in another lawsuit, one that he filed against his former business managers. The Pirates of the Caribbean star accused his managing firm. He said the management group, or TMG, had mishandled his earnings, and Depp had made $650 million from his films. Almost all of it was gone. He sued his business managers for negligence and fraud. Here's what the lawsuit cited. Under TMG's watch, Depp's sister was given $7 million. His assistant, Nathan Holmes, received $750,000. And all of it happened without Depp's knowledge. Depp also claimed that his managers failed to file his taxes on time, and he had to pay more than $5.6 million in late fees. And if that was not enough, Depp also said that his business managers used his money for their selfish benefits. TMG invested his money for its own purposes and returned it without profit, and Depp claimed $25 million for the mishandling. But TMG had other plans. The managing firm countersued Depp. It said that his lavish lifestyle was responsible for his economic crisis, that he had a compulsive disorder to spend $2 million every month, that Depp in fact owed TMG $4.2 million in unpaid loans. There was a lot of back and forth, but the case was then settled before it went to trial. The terms of the agreement were confidential. Depp was pleased with the settlement. Now, why do celebrities end up in such turmoil despite having millions in their banks? They aren't really financially safe. The ultra-rich may seem well off from a distance, but if we take a closer look, many are swimming in debt. They have faced frauds and have been betrayed by their own managers and family members. That's right, even family members. Have you heard of Jean-Paul Gaultier? The celebrated perfumer is one of the richest men in France. His 133-acre estate, known as the Valley, boasts of stables as well as an orangery and apartments previously rented to tenants. But fate changed for him. The ultra-rich perfumer is reportedly surviving on 120 euros a week. And why is that? Because of his own son, who has been against his romantic relationship. Gaultier's companion, Christina Krag, and his only son, Stefan, have been at odds. Stefan is Gaultier's legal guardian. He allegedly refused to pay for maintenance of the house and only gives the couple a weekly allowance of some 120 euros. And in addition to that, a legal filing claims that Stefan cut off the heat and hot water at his father's historic property. He blocked the internet access and confiscated his father's passport. Now, who would have thought that one of the best noses of the 20th century would have such a grim old age? The rich and the famous seem to have a complicated relationship with money. Even after working and earning a fortune, they find themselves in financially unstable positions. And why is that? Are they simply an easy target? Do fraudsters target big personalities for their fortune? Or is this just a case of carelessness? Now, we all do some things wrong. Silly mistakes, carelessness being a part of day-to-day life. One thing many of us end up getting mocked for is not knowing right from left. Well, for those who have routinely been made fun of because of this, there is good news. You are not alone. Studies say that about 1 in 6 people have trouble differentiating between the two sides. Let's think about where all this comes into play first. The most obvious one being directions. How many times have you accidentally told someone to go the wrong way or send the delivery guy to the wrong house? What about turning things? Struggling to turn a doorknob, for example, shutting off the tap instead of letting the water out. Well, the next time someone calls you out for these little directional errors, you can say that it is the problem that others are going through as well, and you are not alone. Research shows that telling right from left is more difficult than distinguishing between up and down or back and front. And that is because of symmetry. Think about, for example, when you look at yourself in a mirror, if you raise your right leg, your reflection moves with you. You know that's your right leg being reflected. What would happen if instead of a mirror, a person was facing you, mirroring your actions? Which of their legs would they raise when you raised your right leg? That's a bit confusing, right? Let me break it down further for you. What about when you're driving? A car is coming towards you. They've got their left indicator on. They turn in the correct direction. So which side have they gone to? Their left, your right, both, neither? Studies say it is harder to tell right from left than up from down because your brain has to work harder. Sometimes you have to consider visual and spatial processing and mental rotation, such as in the case of the mirror effect. It's also easier for people who have greater differences between their limbs. People who can only write or throw and catch with their left hand, for example, find it easier to identify left from right. And that is because they are dependent on only one hand. People who are more ambidextrous find it tougher to differentiate between the two. After all, they don't instinctively know that one side of their body is very different from the other. Now, obviously, studies about this phenomenon were not conducted to stop people from being made fun of. Often, they were done to find ways to prevent medical mishaps. It is an under-researched field, but there have been studies from the 1970s onwards. And that is because identifying left and right is particularly important in the medical profession. There are numerous reports about surgeons accidentally making cuts on the wrong side of the body. One example being that of a British brain surgeon. He came out with a book in 2017. It's called Admissions. And in that book, he details how he once had to give a patient some bad news. Bad news because of a mistake that the doctor himself had made. The patient needed a nerve operated on. Marsh did so, but he drilled out the nerve on the other side of the spinal column. In the medical field, mistakes like this one are called never events. They are preventable mistakes caused by human error. Between April 2021 and March 2022, the most common type of never events recorded by the UK National Health Service was wrong site surgery. 171 out of 407 never events were wrong site surgery. And a large chunk of these were caused by a mix-up between left and right. The report lists 6 separate instances of, I'm quoting, injection to the wrong eye. Not really something you would expect a doctor to do, I'm sure. And to prevent these lateral mistakes, doctors are known to use markers to mark the area that they need to operate on, just so that they don't mess up in the middle of the surgery. Now, this does not mean that the doctors are unqualified, but doctors have to deal with a lot of pressure which sometimes causes them to make silly errors. It points to another factor that makes identification hard, and that's distractions. While studies say about 16% of the population is poor when it comes to judging left from right, the rest can also easily make a mistake, and all it takes is some ambient noise. Someone asking an unrelated question, basically anything that interferes with your concentration. You won't confuse up and down, but are likely to fumble with left and right. So how can you get better at identifying these different sides? Well, the bad news is that neuroscientists are still figuring that out. They believe that it is easier to correct in children as compared to adults. There are tricks that help in navigating this issue, but the simplest solution is pause and think for a bit before giving out directions. Time now to take a quick look at what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Omicron subvariant XBB.1.5, which now accounts for a quarter of US COVID-19 cases, could become the dominant strain in Europe within a few months. Mathematical modeling done by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control suggests that the subvariant, which is the most transmissible to date, could become the dominant variant in the European Union after 1 to 2 months. The agency says that for the general population, the risk associated with the variant is estimated to be low. A New York judge fined Donald Trump's family business the maximum penalty available of $1.6 million for committing tax fraud. The fine is symbolically significant as the ex-president eyes the White House again amid a host of legal woes. The Trump Corporation and Trump Payroll Corp., entities of the Trump Organization, were found guilty last month of running a years-long scheme to defraud and evade taxes through falsifying business records. They were convicted on all 17 counts following a trial, marking the first time the companies had ever been convicted of crimes. Indian Prime Minister flags off the world's longest cruise, MV Ganga Vilas, for its first journey from India's northern city of Varanasi. MV Ganga Villas will be covering 3,200 kilometers, encompassing 27 river systems over a span of 51 days. The Prime Minister said this will ensure that several tourism spots in India appear more prominently on the world tourism map. The longest river cruise will touch major cities including Patna, Kolkata, Bodh Gaya, Majuli and Sundarbans, and will even pass through neighboring Bangladesh's Dhaka. Hundreds of Mogadishu residents attend a rally called by the government to protest against Al-Shabaab, an insurgent group based in Somalia. President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed was greeted by cheers from those who attended the rally and vowed to protect the people of Somalia from Al-Shabaab. Somalia's government and allied clan militias have forced the militants from some territories since launching a major offensive last August, but Al-Shabaab has retaliated with a string of attacks. The group has been waging an insurgency against Somalia's government since 2007. In a move to limit the influence of former President Nursultan Nazarbayev and his family, Kazakhstan revoked a law that granted great authority to the veteran leader. Nazarbayev ruled the energy-rich Central Asian country with an iron fist from 1991 to 2019. The Upper House of Parliament awarded the title of Elbasi, which means head of the nation, to Nazarbayev in 2019, when his daughter was its chairwoman. The title of Elbasi gave Nazarbayev huge influence over politics, and his loyalists retained control of the energy-rich country's economy. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak met with First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, as he visited the country. This is Sunak's first official visit to Scotland since taking office in October, and comes at a time when both countries are struggling with mass strikes, high inflation and a cost of living crisis. A joint announcement on the meeting is due to come later today. An announcement on the delivery of UK government funding to create high-skilled green jobs in Scotland is expected. The Customs and Border Protection has started the construction work on a project to close gaps in the US-Mexico border wall that was built under former President Donald Trump in Yuma. The gaps are along a section of border near the Morelos Dam, the last dam through which the water from Colorado River passes through before entering Mexico. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says that Canada shares his country's concerns regarding North Korea's nuclear activities. While joining Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a news conference, Kishida acknowledged Canada's increased engagement in the Indo-Pacific region as a Pacific state. On Thursday, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that the onus is on North Korea to return to talks about giving up its nuclear weapons program. North Korea has been subjected to UN sanctions since 2006 over its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The Hockey World Cup in India is officially underway. World number 1 Australia began their campaign with an 8-0 thrashing of France. Meanwhile, 2016 Olympic champions Argentina edged South Africa 1-0 in the tournament opener. Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been found not guilty of 6 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault. The 28-year-old will face a retrial after the jury was unable to reach verdicts on a charge of raping one woman and attempting to rape another.
And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good evening.